So it's been 2 years. I wasn't here last year, and a number of people have come up to me and said, "What's new? You're always doing cool, weird, and interesting things. What cool, weird, and interesting things are you doing?" Well, I'm on sabbatical. I have now gotten tenure. Yeah! I also got promoted. I'm now a senior instructor, so I'm a tenured senior instructor at the University of Calgary. I'm very happy about this, very grateful for the opportunity to have this. And along with this, my supervisor said, "Jason, you are working so hard, we're worried about you burning out, so we're going to give you a year with no teaching and no committee work." It's called a research and scholarship leave, affectionately known as sabbatical. And he said, "And I want you to relax and chill out and kick back." And I said, "Great! I'm going to write an encyclopedia on the entire energy sector." I wish I was kidding, but I'm not. It's at synergyalberta.ca, and my talk is largely taken from that. I've also put together my Energy 101 class that was offered on campus exclusively. I've had a number of people say, "Well, why can't you teach that course to industry?" Well, this year and this year only, I can come to your company and teach for one day my Energy 101 class. If you're interested, please just get a hold of me. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about who's using how much energy, how much power. What does that mean physically? Why does it matter? We're going to try and make this something you can really wrap your mind around. Second thing is how and why that's getting bigger. Now, I talked to a whole bunch of people over quite a bit of wine last night, so most of you have already heard this part. Actually, most of them are sleeping off the wine. And then I want to briefly touch on what the biggest problem with that is, because we tend to think in terms of, oh, the problem is this, and I think the problem is actually something else. And we'll talk about that. Okay, first, I want to distinguish between two different types of countries. There are the countries that belong to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. These are also occasionally referred to as developed economies, more developed economies, modern economies, first world countries. The name changes every 6 months or depending on who you're talking with. But broadly speaking, we can just call these the rich countries, and they're in this map in blue. And then the red and the not quite red are the everybody else, the non-OECD countries. And unfortunately, the data that I'm using does not yet pull out the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and I will talk in a moment about why that's important. But we can see, broadly speaking, that Western Europe, North America, Australia, Japan, those are our OECD countries, Turkey as well. And if we look at the energy use, the units here are millions of tons of oil equivalent, we can see the blue line is the wealthy countries, and the red line is the rapidly developing countries, the non-OECD countries. And what we can see is that in 2007, somewhere thereabouts, the non-OECD countries started using more energy than the OECD countries. This is total, okay? And this is kind of a big deal. But I think the bigger deal is that if you look at the graph for the wealthy countries, the blue line, it's more or less flat compared to the red line, which looks like it's climbing up to go to Banff, okay? Very, very steep, rapidly changing energy use. And this is because the amount of energy that we use goes very tightly with how our economy grows. And since the economies in these red countries are developing way faster than the economies in the blue countries, we are seeing much, much faster energy growth in those countries. However, if we now say electricity instead of just energy, do we see the same thing? Absolutely. Electricity growth is faster than energy growth. Population is growing, although we'll talk about that in a moment. Energy growth is faster than population growth, and electricity growth is faster even than energy growth. But what's happening with the population? Well, back in 1960, there were 3 billion people on the planet, and then somewhere around 1974, we hit 4 billion people. and then 5 billion people. I actually remember 5 billion people. That was 1988. And then right before the year 2000, we had 6 billion people. And I'm hoping most people remember not too long ago when we hit 7 billion people. And we're rapidly going up. And what's going to happen is we're going to hit 10 billion people and stop. The world population is unlikely to grow much beyond 10, maybe 11 billion people. And if you want to know more about that, I've got some slides. I took them out. There wasn't time, but you can ask that as a question afterwards. Why will there only be 10 billion people? Okay? But the interesting question is, specifically, where is the growth? Specifically, where is the population growing? And I was really surprised to discover that if you divide up, once again, the population of the blue countries and the population of the red countries, and you put all the blue countries together, they're that bottom line, and you'll notice it's relatively flat. But if you look at the red line, that's where the population is growing. Now, I don't have time to get into all of the interesting nuances about this population growth. It's also rapid urbanization. In the next 30 years, we will double the total number of people living in cities in the world, which means that we need to build infrastructure commensurate with another Los Angeles, another New York, another Tokyo, another Seoul, another Shanghai, and unfortunately even another Toronto. I mean, all the cities, the equivalent of that many people, will need to be built up in infrastructure because people in these developing economies are moving to cities. Okay? So if we switch and divide out, so notice there's a little more than 1 billion people in the wealthy countries and almost 6 billion people in those rapidly developing countries. So there's a whole lot more people in those less wealthy economies. So that means we need to look at per capita energy use. And if we look at per capita energy use, once again, the blue line corresponds to those OECD countries: US, Canada, Mexico, France, Germany, Spain, Portugal, Turkey, Australia, and so forth. The per capita energy use is quite a bit higher. But if we look very, very closely at this red line, what we see is this red line is growing quite quickly. Quick question for you. If we define extreme poverty as living on under $1.50 worldwide a day, $1.50, so $1.50 Canadian. In the last 20 years, what has happened to the number of people living under that line? How many for it's gone up by a factor of 2? How many for it's basically stayed the same? And how many for it's gone down? Okay, those are your 3 choices. We'll say up by a factor of 2, equal, and down by a factor of 2. So how many for twice as many poor people in the world? How many for the same number of people? Remember, it's extreme poverty, below the $1.50. And how many for it's actually gone down by a factor of 2? Your group does much better than the average group. The answer is C. The number of people living in extreme poverty has been cut in half in the past 20 years. So we're seeing rapid population growth in these developing economies, but their economies are growing faster because their energy use is growing faster than their population. We are starting to watch poverty get smaller and smaller and hopefully disappear. Okay? Per capita electricity growth, same sort of graph. Okay, so who cares? Who cares about energy? This was a heated discussion last night. I make the claim that we don't actually care about energy unless we happen to work in the energy sector. Much in the same way that we don't actually care about shipping unless that directly relates to our job. I want my package to show up on my doorstep when I'm home and not in the shower. And beyond that, that's all I want to worry about shipping. The same thing with energy. We don't care about calories. I don't want calories. I want bacon. Okay? I don't want gasoline. I don't want electricity. I don't want natural gas. I don't want pipelines. What I want is food. I want travel. I want to be able to drive from Calgary to Edmonton whenever I want to. And I, as a consumer, don't care whether, at some fundamental level, this is a fuel cell vehicle, a gasoline-powered vehicle, or an electric vehicle. I want transportation. Electricity? I don't care about electricity. I just want my iPod to work. I don't care about natural gas. I'm sorry for all of you in the oil and gas sector. I don't care about natural gas at all. I want a warm house. I want cooked food. I want to be able to take a hot shower. And I want to forget about how I'm getting that, and that's what most people are doing. And there's a problem with that, and I'll come back to it, I promise. And I don't really want pipelines. I don't. What I want is I want to live in Alberta, a province I love, and I want Alberta to have a healthy economy so that people can keep sending their students to the University of Calgary, and I can keep doing my crazy antics in front of the students and get paid. Okay? So it's what energy gives us, it's not energy itself. It is the energy services that energy provides that matters. It's everything in the right-hand column, and part of the difficulty with the energy sector is we keep talking about energy literacy as if people really care about the left-hand column, and nobody does, unless you're getting paid for it. Okay? So what are these energy services, and how are we getting it? How much are we using? All right, I want everybody to go like this. That's 1 watt. Okay? Now I want everybody to stand up. Now sit down. Now stand up. Now sit down. That's 100 watts. And interestingly, if you average the amount of power put out by a person over an entire day, it's roughly the energy that you were just expending, the power of 100 watts. Which means that every time you use 100 watts, that's effectively an energy servant. These energy servants give us trips to the store. It gives us the goods in the store. It gives us the power to run the goods in the store. I drive to the store, I buy a computer, I go home, I plug it in, I use the computer. Okay, so we've got something physical. Everybody knows what it's like to stand up and sit down. So humans are really energy rich. On average, humans throughout the world use 20 energy servants per day. So the average person has 20 people standing up and sitting down for them all day. That's the average in the entire world. Oh, but have we been talking about the entire world as if it's one uniform economy? No, we're dividing it into the OECD and the non, the rich and the becoming rich. So the non-OECD countries, it's only 14 energy servants. So 20 is the overall average, 14 is the average for those blue countries. Sorry, the red countries. The OECD countries, however, average 50. Okay? But are we in an average OECD country? No, 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 no. We are in Canada at 110. Interestingly, if you take out Brazil, Russia, India, and China, the average drops from 14 down to about 7 or 8. But I haven't had a chance to take that data out yet. Tune in next year. Or go to my encyclopedia. This is why Canada is such a wealthy country. So I argue that rather than trying to make Canada energy poor, what we should do is try and, do the energy efficiencies and cut back and drive small cars and turn off the lights and insulate our houses properly. That's a big one that nobody ever talks about. Great, that'll reduce our energy use by about 30%. But our population's going to go up, that winds up leveling off. But if we want to get everybody in the world up to our level of wealth in Canada, we currently use 16 units that happen to be called terawatts. It's a meaningless unit. But the current worldwide total is 16, and what we need is 80 terawatts in the future. We need 5 times as much energy in order for everyone to be as wealthy as Canadians. Okay? So energy is needed to live the way we want to. And it was very shocking for me as I started teaching my course and researching this process that on the left, we have the way we keep warm in Canada. And I have one of those things that looks an awful lot like that sitting in my basement. And something that warms my water that looks an awful lot like that one sitting in my basement. On the right-hand side, we have a little girl, I assume she's about 12, in Nepal, and that's biomass. And when we talk about people burning biomass to keep warm, this is what it looks like. So not only are our energy servants more abundant, they're more convenient, they're more reliable, and they're safer. On the left, that's what I use to cook at home, although the picture's from a catalog. On the right, you have a traditional cook stove. That traditional cook stove there is the equivalent of 2 packs of cigarettes for every woman and child in the house. The men in these societies are generally not in the house. Just saying. 2 packs of cigarettes a day from cooking like that. I like my stove. But the most shocking for me, the difference that I think is most illustrative is almost night and day of what the world looks like without light. We have the same man in the same room, and let's be really clear, he's sewing. Who sews? Try to imagine sewing in the room on the left. That's a kerosene lantern. We are not getting into the fact that generally a woman, has to walk 7 kilometers to 10 kilometers a week to get the kerosene for that light. Nor do we even really want to get into the fact that that kerosene causes lung problems. But I do want to briefly mention that it occasionally knocks over and catches people on fire. On the right, we have a solar cell hooked to some light-emitting diodes. The difference is stark. This is why we care about energy. It's the services that it gives us. Okay? So where's the world getting its energy now? So here's where the electricity gets, where we get the power for our electricity from. If you can mouse over the red, this is our fossil fuels, the blue. This is hydro. Green is nuclear. There's the wind. The brown is the biomass. And you'll notice the solar, you have to actually hover over on the right-hand side because the wedge is that small. What we are talking about is not commensurate with what we are doing. There's a disconnect. What is the fastest growing energy source in the world? Loud and proud. Coal. The blue line is the coal use in tons of oil per person, and once again the blue countries, and look at what the red looks like. Okay? We're seeing a dramatic increase in coal use per person, but it's far more dramatic if we use the total. Okay? If we can now switch back to hopefully this one will work. Okay? So this is the coal use in 1965, hit play. And we can see that coal use by region, it goes Africa, Asia, Pacific, Europe and Eurasia, Middle East, North America, South and Central America, and keep watching it as we get to 2000, and coal use just takes off. Okay? That's mostly China, but it's also India. Back to the PowerPoint, please. The total energy use is going up, but it's not the wind that we keep hearing about. It's not solar. Okay? So what does that look like? Well, Alberta gets half of its electricity from coal. In 1 year, if we put all of that coal onto a coal train, and I know it's mostly mind mouth here, that coal train would stretch from Calgary to Sudbury. That's 1 year of coal for Alberta. 1 year of coal for the world would stretch around the planet 40 times. We are using a lot of coal, and it's increasing. So if we want to avoid CO2 use and the other things that happen from coal, I got a specific request to include this, so I did. That is the size of the solar panels necessary to power Alberta. So if you think the land use rights are difficult with putting in a little gas well thing, try to imagine suddenly plopping down an extra Edmonton somewhere in the province. But that's very small compared to the size of the wind farms that would be necessary. Okay? Our energy is very dense when we're using fossil fuels. However, because I'm a nuclear guy, I decided to bring some coal. And you're welcome to touch this, but you have to wash your hands afterwards. It's not clean coal. This is about a kilowatt hour's worth of electricity. Okay? And here we have a 1-watt solar panel. This is enough to basically give you this much power. This powers your cell phone. It's empty. Still, they won't give me the uranium. Basically the same size. This powers your cell phone. This charges your cell phone. It doesn't power any of the back end stuff. This is just powering your cell phone itself. The back end of your cell phone, as we were discussing this morning, uses as much electricity as your refrigerator. This would last a family of 4 in Alberta for how long? More. 100 years. This is 100 years of electricity, and this is what the waste looks like. So when we're talking about nuclear waste, this is nuclear waste for a family of 4 in Alberta, which is why nuclear waste, as far as I'm concerned, is the best part about nuclear power. It's small, it's easy to control, it's terribly deadly, but we know how to actually handle that. So why do we bother mentioning the CO2? There is a discrepancy, once again, between what we're talking about and what is happening. The media, the public media, the newspapers, the television, the radio, common conversation leads us to believe there is some scientific doubt about climate change. There have been over 14,000 papers published about how humans are affecting the climate. There have been 24 that reject global warming. 24 papers compared to 14,000. The entire list of all 24 papers, I think it's actually now 26, is there at that web address. My favorite one is the one that pretends that the Earth isn't spinning to make the math easy. Ooh. There is no scientific debate about the consequences of CO2. We are not running out of natural gas, of coal, of oil. Well, we are eventually. And the biggest problem with fracking is not that we can now light our tap water on fire. That's not related. It's not. The biggest problem with these things is that we now have access to so much carbon that had been safely buried underground that we're now bringing up and burning, that we are changing the atmosphere in a way that's an awful lot like the way that asteroid changed the atmosphere when it completely wiped out the dinosaurs. We're doing that again, right now. But it's an interesting balance, because if we turn off all of our coal, oil, natural gas, we will freeze to death while starving in the dark. And if we don't, well, things are going to get bad in other ways. This is not an easy problem. This is not a simple problem. This is not a case of big oil is doing evil things. This is a case of the consequences for our actions, both short-term and long-term, need to be taken into real consideration, put on the table, so that we can have exactly what Synergy is all about. A real conversation where not just facts, but evidence, perspective, and good, keen judgment are brought to the table. I want to thank my team. My students make me look good, and I'm grateful for it. Ellen Lloyd, Braden Heffernan, Jacqueline Williams, James Jenna, and Jazz Deep Tour have worked their little tails off in exchange for a small amount of pay. Yunying Carpenter, Gokul Duran, Shining Chen, Isaac Fauber, and Karen Street have also worked their tails off for free. My 529 and 507 students have generously donated their senior projects to my energy encyclopedia. We currently have 200 pages. We are hoping to grow to over 1,000. Stay tuned for more, and check out energyeducation.ca. Thank you for your attention.